Poof. Okay, so let's see what we've got going on here. YouTube. Animation Truman Show. Poof. Go live. Nope, looks like I am live. Okay, I didn't announce this. I probably should post something on Discord. So, announcements. I'll just put live now. Sorry, friends, to be a little slow on the draw here. Okay, I want to check a couple things here. Let's see. On the live stream, it looks like, yeah, we're looking at Krita. So I think today I'm going to just kind of dive in. It would be worth doing a slight recap of how things went yesterday. Yesterday was a bit of a rough session. So let's go ahead and play our intro just because it's fun. Ready? Live at 10 a.m. This is supposed to say 10:30.
If you're like me, and you got no life and there's nowhere to go, then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
So, the obvious question being, how
If
could
you're
we
like
possibly be so
and
sloppy?
you got no
like this is a great example. I thought I'd like super lengthen this so that after it gets done playing, it doesn't just like immediately loop. But I think maybe I didn't save it or something. Anyway, okay, so let me jump over here. Yesterday was a weird day here, live streaming. Because it was one of those days where, you know, all the software seemed to be giving me grief. And so when I ended the live stream, it was like, you know, this is becoming a little frustrating, so let's just kind of call it a day, right? Well, plus I'd been live streaming for a couple hours. Anyway, it's actually kind of funny, though, because in hindsight, I actually kind of got a lot done yesterday. It's kind of scary. So I suppose the only thing I want to say about it today is that for many years, there's been this ongoing tug of war between using Krita, Tahoma, and Blender for various bits. And yesterday, after I was kind of having some issues with Tahoma, I actually did do this shot in Blender. And it came out okay, but to tell you the truth, I wound up having to bring it into Krita for some color correction and different things that certainly if you use the node-based compositor in Blender, whatever I did in Krita, I could have done in Blender. You know, that's almost always the case. So the sumupence of yesterday is that over the years, whenever I've done battle with the tools, I seem to always wind up back at Krita for all its shortcomings. It does seem to be the most intuitive and feature complete for the type of work I'm doing. And I would have to say that's the way it turned out yesterday. When, you know, I've only been back in the animation, you know, saddle for about a week. And so I'm sort of relearning some of the things that I had to learn, hard-fought lessons over a period of time in the past, and be reminded. So the basic rule for me is kind of where I've landed all along, which is most of the work gets done in Krita. The main reason to go to Tahoma, what tripped me up was that Tahoma, especially because of animation caching, Tahoma feels more fluid. At a glance, it feels more fluid. In practice, it's more fluid to the extent that sometimes in Krita you have to wait one whole second for the animation cache to fill, so that playback can begin, that type of thing. But to sum up yesterday, I would say this. I did a bunch of tests on my laptop as well, the Linux workflow, and the conclusion is basically the same. Krita is definitely more stable. than Tahoma. Tahoma actually has more issues on Linux than it does on Windows. And so, I'm just kind of back to where I've been all along. So anyway, yesterday, as I say, quite a bit actually got done yesterday. This would have been a couple days ago.
Sir, it's Luka. When does he ever not act suspicious?
Fair point, I suppose.
Highness, you needn't worry.
I mean, I like the way things are
Tianara
working,
cannot get
that's
far
for
in the
sure.
forest at night.
Yeah, actually, that's... let's see. No, Tianara...
Tianara cannot get
okay, so
far in the
that was not
forest at
yesterday.
night.
This is actually kind of legacy stuff that I was animating around. Now,
Let's regroup at
I
dawn.
believe I did that
Sir.
yesterday. And that yesterday.
Managing troops is just slowing us
And
down.
then
I'll agree that they're slowing you
that
down.
whole
Your
shot
Highness.
was done last night, and the whole damn thing took 45 minutes. or
They're
something,
slowing
so
you down, Your Highness.
Wait. This shot was done in Blender, grease pencil, but because the color was a little off compared to the earlier shot here, I actually color corrected it here and then changed my mind, brought the layers, which is really only two. You had the animated layer of Vespar and then you had the background, brought them into Krita, and in the space of 5 minutes was able to dial in the look just fine.
I've already sent
then
a
I did this
detachment
shot
toward
completely
Gripson
separately.
and another back to flank Newsy's borders in case she backpedals.
What I did here was, obviously I leveraged the earlier shot, and it's just a bunch of lip sync, but what I did was I put a slow push on it, and the score will help once there's music in there too.
do? I've already
The
sent
slow
a
push
detachment
kinda
toward Gripson
keeps you
and
moving, 'cause
another back
obviously
to
it's a
flank
pretty
Newsy's
static shot.
borders in case she backpedals. We'll find her.
He's got this little squint of the eyebrows towards the end, which was actually done by selecting the eyebrows. And this is a good example of where Krita kind of shines, is just Control X, Control V. And by default, it puts it in a different layer. And so then I was able to sort of animate the eyebrows separate from the rest of the face.
We'll
So
find
that
her.
worked. Now, the only thing I could say, maybe, I do wish that beyond the plastic tool, I wish that there was something in Krita that was kind of akin to the plastic tool, just because it would be faster. So going back here, what I'm saying is, this is probably, I should say, where Tahoma shines, would be that you can treat all of these layers as a single entity and deform them. Now, that is actually possible in Krita, but you sort of have to do it frame by frame. So if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, what I mean is, let me put it this way. Okay, so intuitively what you'd think is, if I can put all these in a group, and let's assume they all have animation keyframes, then if I use, let's say I want to use the liquefy the way that you would use the plastic tool in Tahoma. So you might do something like this, right? So you kind of move it around. And I did note yesterday that the liquefy does seem, in the latest version of Krita, to be, it is more stable, but it's also less performant. So here's the problem you have with doing that. It doesn't act as sort of a modifier that affects everything going forward. So what's going to happen is you get to the next frame, and obviously things jump back. You see? So there's your quintessential problem. That's a solvable problem. I mean, if you wanted to just deform the body, and then it's going to take you literally 90 seconds probably to move the mouths around to get them right back to where they need to be. But so that's just a slight deficiency. And the solution in my workflow has been, if I've got a character like this, where everything looks pretty good, the lip sync's fine, but I just want to put a little bit of a shift in his body weight or something, that's when what I tend to do is turn off the background, render this whole thing out with its alpha channel, bring it into Tahoma and just use the plastic tool to deform him, and then render it out and bring it back into Krita. And that, so it's like once in a while you got to jump between programs either by rendering and importing, or in many cases, if this wasn't already thoroughly animated, you could just cut and paste the group and use the plastic tool on that. So anyway, it's all good. Like I said, yesterday was a bit of a rough session, but on balance, actually kind of a lot got done. So where are we at here? I mean, this sequence is not complete, but I mean, it's almost a minute and a half long. So I've got a shot with Vespar I need to go ahead and get rocking on. So let's go to town. This has already been saved, such as it was. So do we want to start with Vespar here? That'd probably be the smart thing to do. I have no idea, by the way, what's going on in the chat. I can't see it. Let me jump over there, see if there's anything going on. Oh, yeah, hey, Chizapo. A transform mask won't work. No, okay, that's a great question. A transform mask will work if you're doing a standard straight-ahead transform. In other words, I'll show you. If I grab a group, okay, and I hit the A key, obviously I can transform it. I could also use liquefy. However, if I apply a transform mask, okay, now I can animate the group. All right, so let me just demonstrate. So the whole group, which is his basically ink paint color, blah, blah, blah. This is quite useful for reframing a shot. Like if I said, well, I really don't want him so close to the edge over here, so I'm going to just kind of move him. Then that does what I was talking about you're doing with the plastic tool. It takes the whole collection, animation and all, and moves it. So that's a very, very useful thing. The problem is, and by the way, that little blinky blink you just saw, I think was the animation cache. Let's find out. Let's let it regenerate the cache. So what's the downside of using a transform mask? Number one, traditionally it's been kind of buggy, although in the latest versions of Krita, it pretty much hasn't been. So I would say stability-wise, we're okay. Performance-wise, there's a cost for sure, because Krita is behind the scenes having to transform every single one of these layers every single frame. So if you want to forestall some of that performance penalty, what you would do is you would say, well, okay, wait a second. Let's move this let's turn this transform mask off. Let's just get it out of the way for a moment or something. I guess you could put it up above. But the thing to do would be to just merge the group. What you would actually do in practice, if you're, not stupid like I am sometimes, is you would duplicate the group. So now you've still got it, just in case you need to access all those individuals. Then you would merge this group, which is going to flatten this out, because you say, look, I'm happy with the animation. Everything's working. Okay, so this is the caching problem I mentioned yesterday. Until I've scrubbed it a couple times, nothing happens on the screen. It's not a big deal, but it's a little annoying at times. Okay, so then you take the merged group, which is much more lightweight. You'll see everything cached a lot quicker. Then apply the transform mask to that. Boom. So that would generally be the strategy. So then the question becomes, oh, okay, the transform mask does exactly what I really want to be able to do, which I do with the plastic tool, which is take a whole sequence of stuff that's animated and moving around and blah, 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 and just take it and modify it a little bit. Easy to do with the plastic tool, easy to do in Blender in multiple ways. Not so much here. What are my options that are actually viable? Number one, you can animate this. Okay, so there is a way to make this kind of get the effect I was talking about if you wanted to shift in his body weight. What I would do is I would simply move the center point down here so that anytime any rotation or anything I do would be anchored on that center point. The difference between the transform mask and the regular transform tool is that with the transform tool, every time you jump to the next frame, it's going to reset this center point. This is one of the deficiencies of Krita that really should be corrected. I kind of mentioned this the other day, is that if only, God, I tell you, I really should mention this to Hala, if only the transform tool would freaking remember its settings from one use to the next, the way that filters do, a whole host of animation problems in Krita would be instantly solved. Yes, you would have to use that solution frame by frame. It's not going to interpolate for you, but at least you could do the same thing over and over, and it would make all kinds of animated transforms easier to do, and it would make it easy to do with the plastic tool or the other, the warp, the cage, all these different types of transformations. Okay, that's all kind of background. What I'm telling you here is that by anchoring the center line down here, and probably in this case what I would do is make him just a slight bit bigger so I've got some wiggle room down here off screen. So he could kind of shift like this, right? And that would work. Okay. So then the question becomes, well, what about animating it? Okay. When I'm using an animated transform mask, I want you to, the next part is important. So open your ears really wide. And it could be that from a stability standpoint, things have changed recently with Krita. I don't know. But whenever I've used the transform mask, the following I have always had to, oh my God, seriously people, hang on. Thank you. Okay. Well, that's only happened 853 quadrillion times, and it's actually kind of why I, thanks Sifter. It's actually why I turned off I finally ended the live stream yesterday, is because it's like so freaking many things are going wrong, so many stupid mistakes or little bugs or whatever, that I'm just like, this is not any fun, so fuck it, I'm gone, see ya. That was kind of how I felt at the end. Anyway, okay, so sorry about that. So do I need to recap? Chiziapo, I need you to put something in the comments. Do I need to recap the last 3 minutes that I've been talking? If I do, I will. If you understand what's going on, I'm not going to. Okay, so I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to give me a yes or no. I don't care what the answer is. I'm good either way, but I don't want to recap it if there's no good reason to. Okay? So the very, very brief recap. I mean, for fuck's sake, I just took this whole bit about merging it, and you guys didn't get to see any of it. All right, here's what we're going to do, friends. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to kill this, reopen it, and one good thing about complicated stuff and also bugginess with software is that whenever you have a problem, you do find that when you redo it, it all goes a lot smoother and faster, 9 times out of 10. Okay, so here's the sum uppance. This group is Vespar. I want to do a transform mask, as Chiziapa suggested. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this group, which has his color, it has a color corrector, yada yada. I'm going to take this group and I'm going to duplicate it. Boom, it's duplicated, and then I'm going to turn the duplicate off. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to merge the group. The reason I did that is because once I start doing the transforms, performance will be much, much, much better. If I did it on the whole group, yes, you can do it. Hopefully you got plenty of RAM. But if you want a good balance of performance and you're pretty sure that what's happening in these animated frames is in fact precisely what you want to have happen, then go ahead and merge them, and now it's just a sequence of frames. There's no real brains going on in the background like color correction and all that stuff. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is we don't want to just transform him because we want to animate something. Okay, so what I mentioned about the deficiency of the transform tool is if I were to take this and go like this so that he can rotate this way, what you'll notice is when I go to the next frame, you see it reset the center line. This is, I pointed this out as one of the truly glaring deficiencies of Krita, because if it didn't do that, there are a lot of things. I won't even get into all the things. There are so many things with animation that would be comparatively easy that are all but impossible now. And the thing is that the transform mask tool does address those shortcomings, but it addresses it in a very incomplete and buggy way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit undo a couple times. So I undo that transform, right? So this is again going to be merged, and then we're at that spot where we were before. So let it merge. Okay, so what we want to do is add the transform mask tool. All right. So let us add the transform mask. Okay. So then again, first point that I made was that you can anchor the center point and it will stay there. So that's good. That's number one. Okay. Number two. The part that I said pay close attention, here it is. It was this. Whenever I'm using a transform mask, what I do is I go into the animation curves and I hit the plus sign and I add a keyframe here. In my experience, again, the latest version of Krita may be different, but in my experience, for the most part, there are so many things that are incomplete or just don't work the way you would think at all in this animation curves that it's, for me, functionally useless. So the only reason I put the keyframe in there is so that when I go back here, the transform mask does in fact have a keyframe, which you can see right there. Why do I do that? Because you're gonna be like, Dave, there's no way what you're about to say can't possibly be true, but yet it is. And what it is that even though everything in Krita adds it adds keyframes by hitting the insert key or control insert if you want to make a duplicate keyframe. Turns out that with transform masks, that actually doesn't work. So you can't just add a keyframe here. You can't. I've tried it. Maybe with this latest version you can, but in the entire last 5 years, at no point has that ever worked. Certainly hasn't worked reliably, let's put it that way. If, however, you jump to the animation curves and add a keyframe here with the plus symbol, and you can add other ones if you kind of know where you're going to want things to be, and you want to play around with editing the Bezier curves like this. You want to edit these. See, look at that. All I did was touch it, and immediately something went wrong. I could explain to you what went wrong and why, but it's just not worth the hassle. It's not even worth trying to explain. It's because what Krita does in this interface. I'm not saying that the developers don't know what they're doing. What I'm saying is whatever needs to happen here, they haven't gotten to yet. And so I put no confidence in this interface at all. I expect it to cause Krita to crash, and I expect everything about it. If you've used, the function editor, for example, or the curves editing in Blender, for example, it's stable and it works intuitively. That is not true here. Same thing with Tahoma. Here, it doesn't work at all. So what I do is I add one keyframe to basically tap Krita on the shoulder and say, hey, by the way, we're animating this transform mask. Now, I can do this. Now this all works. Isn't that crazy? So now it's got to think a bit because it's going to be interpolating. This animation is not going to look very good because he's going to be flowing. Flow, 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 right? So that's where you go. And by the way, I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but I got to tell you, I'm pretty sure that at least in the past, general keyframe manipulations in Krita with the transform mask didn't work the way they work with, like with animation keyframes on a paint layer. But let's find out. Like for example, can I go control? Let's just look at this. Okay, so right now the animation cache has not refilled because it's not refilling in the background. That's kind of one of the things I was ranting about yesterday. So what happens is I have to scrub it a bit to sort of wake Krita up to go ahead and calculate the animated keyframes. You can see these little bars here turning gray. Okay, the fact that it doesn't do it in the background, even though the preferences say that you can tell it to do so, but it doesn't. It never has. And so what that means, I kid you not, what that means is if I put animation keyframes on, say, a transform mask, by definition, literally every time I go to scrub it and see what I did, it won't work. Now, once you scrub it, you see what just happened? You see that? Now that it got woke up, it'll work. So now if I hit the play button, he's kind of floating around. Okay. So to get from here to here, I don't want it to be that slow, flowy thing. So what would you do? Well, you could, again, go in here and start manipulating these curves, and good luck to you if you want to do that. But there's basically two ways to do it. I'm going to find out if this works. I have no idea if this is going to work. I'm assuming maybe control drag will make a duplicate. Poof. Okay, it looks like that works. So control drag is cool. So now it's got to redo the cache, obviously. See? And now, because I duplicated this keyframe, he stays put from here to here and then moves. Now, you can get into things like interpolation methods and easing and all that kind of stuff. And ostensibly, that's all kind of available here. All I'm saying is I don't trust it. Just as a probably the best way for me to explain why I don't trust it is to notice the following. And if somebody has some insight about Krita, go ahead and weigh in about this. When you add a keyframe here, what Krita does is it adds animation keyframe data, or basically it keeps track in the background of every possible thing you could want to do with the transform tool. That means there's an animation keyframe for scaling, for shearing, rotation, size, all the things that you didn't necessarily want. Is that necessarily a bad thing? It depends. There's situations where you want to just key everything all at the same time, and there's situations where you only want to key the things that you want to key. So why is it a problem? It's only a problem because when you go and you start manipulating these, what you find is, as I say, it's kind of decidedly non-intuitive. Now, it kind of works. Like if I drag this around, well, actually it kind of doesn't work. So I'm dragging this around. First of all, it's like things are coming to mind as I do this. Okay, number one, when I grab this, I don't really see anything in the interface over here that tells me what the hell I just grabbed. I actually have no idea what the green is. You can figure it out based on the color, except that there's two different parameters that have the same color. It's like, what am I even working on here? Okay, so that's number one. Number two is, well, you would think if I'm going to manipulate this, I should see it moving around here on the screen, right? Nope, not with Krita. With other applications you do, but not with Krita. So I'm not going to say the developers aren't doing a great job, because the capabilities of the transform mask are pretty cool. They were a godsend compared to before we had it, which I think was version 5. The problem is they haven't gotten to this yet. So this is not kind of real time. So if you want real time, my suggestion is think in terms of what you're doing on the screen. That's real time. This is real time. Okay? Stick with that and you'll be a happy camper, comparatively speaking. Okay, so now this duplication of a keyframe becomes important because if you really want to control motion without getting into easing and manipulating curves, then the simplest way to do it is to just duplicate a keyframe and have a short space between keys. That's it. So this is a hold, and this is, animated. Okay, I'm sure that all makes sense. Hey, Mar. Hey, Darren. Looks like we've got Yapo, Sifter, Darren, and Amar. Okay, so the final thing I want to say about transform masks is that, in a nutshell, anything but a standard transform does not work. Period. End of story. There's nothing more to say. It doesn't work. So the shortcoming of the software would be that you should not have the ability to even select these with the transform mask. You really shouldn't. If you do liquefy, can you kind of sort of do it? Yeah, it does seem to work. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe with the latest version of Krita, maybe it's actually working. Nope. This is exactly what I always used to do in the past. So with a if you can believe it, friends. Okay, hold on now. I might have to check myself. Okay, so in the past, this was normal behavior. If you tried to use liquefy, because obviously you're trying to animate it, with the transform tool, what would happen is earlier frames would just disappear, and there was no getting them back. Now I'm backpedaling here a little bit and maybe eating my words for the simple reason that it looks like what might be going on now is it's just having to calculate the effect of the liquefy tool, and instead of giving you a progress bar, it's just going blank. So if that's the case, this would be a really cool development. I haven't gotten this far with Krita. What is this, 5.2.6? Yep, I'm using 5.2.6. Okay, so the only way to test what I'm fiddling with here would be to do it again. If I can put in 2 manipulations with Liquify and it works, then all my bitching and moaning about the Liquify tool with the transform mask basically can be set aside, and we can say that we do have some improvement here in Krita that is definitely on the cool side. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that I want this to happen. Okay, so now because it's a transform mask, think about it, guys. You got a different Liquify operation here than you had here. So no wonder it's taking Krita a while to calculate it. Think about what Krita has to do here. You're taking the Liquify tool. Okay, so let's just wait a second and let it think. What you're doing is you're taking the Liquify tool, and the only way probably to think about it would be this. I have this circle. Now what I have effectively is a fall off from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. So there's a range of influence, okay? So if you think about it, you can think about your interface as being this pixel grid where the circle of the Liquify tool is a circle of pixels, okay? And each pixel has a different weight. So depending on how you move the circle around once you click the left mouse button, you're moving the pixels in your image varying amounts as that distance moves out from the center of the range of influence. And then what Krita has to do is calculate that weighted manipulation on every single pixel on every single frame going forward and backward. That's a lot of calculating, friends. So the question I have now, I'm really encouraged to see that the image didn't just disappear forever. So I'm going to wait for this. I'm going to do something really damaging here. I'm going to just manipulate the hell out of this because I want to see what's going to happen in terms of interpolation between here and here. This should be interesting. So what I'm going to do, I would expect this to take a bit of time, but I'm going to do it because okay. Okay, number one, the Liquify operation did nothing at all. Okay, so that's a clue. So now we can see that actually it turns out it doesn't work. Therefore, what application would the transform mask... Now wait a second. So now that's squished, but that's the squish that I did back on this frame. Oh, that is very strange. I'm going to go between keyframes and see if anything shows up. That is really interesting. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, yeah, it's a massive, massive performance penalty, but if it works, there's plenty of situations where it would kind of be nice. It looks to me like it's just not interpolating. Okay, so what does it do here where there's a definite keyframe? Let's find out. Okay, so, you know, programmatically, I could totally see where there's probably some things you could do with the transform mask that would be helpful. Okay, so I'm going to try something different just for kicks and grins. I'm going to add another transform mask, and I'm going to leave it in Liquify mode. I'm going to... Okay, so, by the way, let me pause here and remind you guys of something. Let me turn this off. So, an immediate question would be, well then, is there any point at all in using the other transform methodologies other than the basic transform with the transform mask? And there is one reason why you might want to. It would be when you want to add a transform mask and you want to essentially use it, God, back in the days of 3ds Max, it was referred to as a world space modifier. In other words, if you had multiple layers that you wanted to manipulate as a group with the transform mask such that animated elements on the screen are affected by it over time, here's the key. I hope that makes sense. The key is you can't animate it. The transform mask can only be, in practical terms, used in an animated way if you're using the standard transform. Okay, so the best example I can give of what I'm even talking about would be to, for example, let's use the warp tool and let's move it over here. Okay, and then let's like squeeze this down and squeeze this down. Okay, if I had a spaceship flying through the screen here on another layer that was affected by this transform mask, the spaceship could fly through here, and it's going through a wormhole, right? And so when it comes through here, the spaceship would get squished, and then it would emerge back out of it. So you could animate the spaceship, and it could be manipulated in space by the transform mask. But you cannot animate the transform mask. So what you wouldn't be able to do reliably, as far as I know, is change this over time. Now, does it turn out in the latest version of Krita that actually maybe you can with, say, the warp tool? I don't know. So let's go to the curves and let's put in a keyframe. Okay, so now I'm a little worried because the very first thing that happened was my imagery disappeared. Okay, but let's find out. So what I'll do is I'll just go to here, grab the transform mask, and just stretch it back out again. And if these nodes can animate, then we've got some improvement. And by the way, very specifically, I would say this, the warp tool, would in fact be the appropriate substitute for Tahoma's plastic tool. Okay, there is a keyframe there. We just don't know if it's going to animate. So this is there, and this, yeah, see, it didn't animate. It doesn't animate the nodes. So I'm going to say, I have to say, I think this is probably something that's coming at some point, because this is, compared to Liquify, this is mathematically pretty simple, because you're not keeping track of every pixel inside this box. You just have to keep track of the nodes. So mathematically, it's pretty easy. Problem is, we don't have a way to do it. So I guess with that, I'll just leave that where it is with transform masks, because unfortunately the best we have would be the ability to do basic transforms and animate them. So in this case, what we would do is we'd say, actually we don't want that. We want, actually let me check one more thing. I'm going to put a keyframe there. I hate the way the art keeps disappearing. But I'm going to take the whole bloody thing and move it over here and see if that works. If that's somewhere in between, then that would be, look at what Krita's doing. It's filling in the entire animation cache, everything except what we want to see. That's actually the part of the Krita code I'd like to, I wish there was like a Docker out there. Like, if I could install a Docker that has a complete Krita development environment all baked in, you just run the Docker and you're good to go, I would probably be very tempted to take a look at the code and see if this could be improved, because it's just a signal flow problem. There's things that are being done in a certain order. Yeah, it didn't work. Okay, so this didn't work, and just Control-Shift-X. Okay, that's another difference. Keyframes on a transform mask do not respect your hotkeys. So here, if I grab this frame and go Control-Shift-X, the keyframe, it disappears. Okay? If I do the same thing on transform mask, there's a keyframe, Control-Shift-X. Okay, let me qualify it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That's the whole story. That's crazy, man. Sometimes, a moment ago it didn't work and now it did. So hence the lecture about transform masks. If you're gonna do anything except a free transform, you do so at your own peril. Okay, so if I was gonna improve this shot a little bit, this is what I would do. I would put in one keyframe this way, like I showed you. I would go here, move him to here, kind of put him like that, something like that. Okay, and then I would just kind of say, okay, right now, see how I'm scrubbing? And it took Krita a minute, the animation didn't show up. This is probably the single biggest thing I would really, really like to change. Just because your computer has plenty of spare CPU cycles. Like right now, I'm not doing anything. So the animation should be being cached into memory while I'm not doing anything. It shouldn't wait for me to do something and thereby guarantee that it's always failing to work, actually. It works after 5 seconds, you know, after you've waited, but that's a bit silly. Anyway, there it is. So we've got this. So what I would do, will it respect this hotkey? I'm going to hit Control Drag. Yep, that worked. Okay, so now I can go here and just put a little body shift weight, or a body weight shift, I guess I should say. Okay, so now let's let the animation cache rebuild, and then you'll see. Okay, so now as far as my choice, you know, in animation, I'm not actually loving that or anything, but okay, let's move forward. This kind of works. What time is it? 11:12. Okay, this kind of works. I'm going to put the preview thing from Vegas here so that I don't have to actually switch screens. So what we're going to do is we are going to come back to this shot. So I actually have the right shot open. This shot is 3-10-D, so this will have to be, what I'm working on right now, will have to be 3-10-E. So I'm going to save this as new folder 03-10-E. And I actually prefer all caps for no particular reason. Okay. Then this is going to be the same modification. And don't forget the following, friends. Control R. Don't forget to change your render path. This needs to be E, not C. Otherwise, I'm going to accidentally overwrite the previous shot that was based on the same assets. Okay, so now I do not know if I exit out of this and just save the file, if these settings will be saved. So I'm going to cancel this and save, and I'll bet you they were lost. Yes, they were lost. So now that you could argue that's because I did cancel, of course. The problem is there is no way to say okay to the settings without actually rendering it. Unless maybe you went like this. I could do that, I guess. Just escape out of it. That worked. Okay, cool. So that's a step in the right direction. If you don't want to render a bunch of stuff that really wasn't ready to be rendered. Okay. So now the last thing that took place in the story was a fairly lengthy bit from Tobias.
I've already sent a detachment toward Gripson and another back to flank Newsy's borders in case she backpedals. We'll find her.
Okay, so now we're going to see a moment of Vespar revealing a bit of real concern for Tianara, actually. Okay, and by the way, just going to mention this. His mouth is not filled, so the previous shot, it actually has an issue that needs to be fixed. Just make a mental note there, people. Okay. Okay, so honestly, this, from an acting standpoint, these two expressions right here really are the key. None of this stuff matters. Of course, you can't actually see it right now because once again, Krita refuses to fill the animation cache. It's almost like you should just like hit the play button, whether you want to play it or not. Just hit the play button and sit through it. Would not be the worst idea ever. Okay, so this group I'm going to merge because this is basically the background, and it's got a I don't know if it's color correction. It's probably blur, actually. And there's no reason to waste CPU cycles on calculating the blur on every frame. In fact, that may actually, yeah, that actually dramatically just sped up the animation cache. Okay, so in order to not be a total curmudgeon, I should really make this point. A lot of times the so-called shortcomings of the software are kind of your own fault. Are kind of my fault. This background image had a Gaussian blur on it that was having to be calculated for every single frame. Now, just for fun, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the transform tool to shift this just a little bit in order to force the whole scene to be just a little bit different, in order to see what that does to my animation caching. First of all, I'll try to scrub. Okay, scrubbing still doesn't work. However, you'll notice that filling the animation cache literally took no time at all, which is pretty impressive. So, just be aware of the things you have going on in your shot that are costly in terms of, CPU or RAM. And if you can optimize them, which I did here, obviously, then by all means do so. Getting rid of that entirely probably won't make any difference. Okay. Because it was turned off. So that's something Krita does well, is it doesn't waste CPU cycles doing calculations on layers that are actually turned off. Okay. So now what I'm saying is, for this shot, I like the whole sort of attitude through here. So I'm going to take all of these guys and get rid of them. Okay, and now I believe if I do, what is it? I believe it's Shift Alt. Shift Alt lets me click and grab and ripple everything. Okay, so Vespar's line is I just don't want her slipping away again. I just don't want her slipping away again. Yeah, so we're not getting the concern yet. So now I'm actually starting to think twice about what I'm going to undo that. I actually think this is two shots. See, he says I don't want her slipping away again. Then it cuts back to Tobias. Gribson is her likely path. Then Vespar says, unless she doubles back to Newsy. And Tobias says, well, it's possible, but then she'd fall right into our net, wouldn't she? And this is where Vespar is. He says, I mean, she's a spirited girl, but alone in this wilderness. Like, he's concerned about her kind of thing. So, honestly, probably being locked in this body position through all of that is probably not the greatest idea either. So that's something I want to think about. But the first line of dialogue is, I just don't want her slipping away again. So I'm going to make this short and assume this can just be, this is a short shot. And the only thing we really need to concern ourselves with here is his mouth. So it's a sulky thing. And the way we could actually use, liquefy here would be something like this. Let's go here and push this up a bit. And just so you know, I'm just trying something here, right? I'm not totally sure it's going to work. I'm going to assume, let's see here. That's actually not bad. That's pretty much what I was going for. And yeah, I tell you, I'm really a bit disappointed. Maybe my settings are wacky or something, but I gotta tell you that maybe bring the spacing down to the liquefy tool seems considerably okay. That maybe that helps. Okay, well if I'm going to do that, then the amount needs to be brought down to 0.1. Okay, so as near as I can tell, guys, this is what it looks like. I've never, by the way, used pressure with the liquefy tool. I always found it was more problematic than not, and it does appear to me right now that when I click on these little icons, literally nothing happens. If anything's, I guess it does. I guess it does turn on and off. I'm going to leave that off. Why the flow is grayed out, I'm not sure. So let's assume this is maybe getting us in the zone, and for kicks and giggles, in case it's going to allow us to keep the setting from use to use, I'm going to put that at 150. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, that is better. That is better. That is better. That's a little more control. I need to do those same settings on my fast laptop. Okay, and then what I want to do is have one in between. So I don't mind this kind of slow frame-by-frame animation. I think it's often... Okay, that's a problem. Let's get rid of that one. Hang on. I guess it looks better when it's kind of sudden. So, okay, forget that. So he says, I just don't want us slipping away again. Okay, so let's get rid of all these. Hello, shift. Okay. All right. And then I'm just going to feel the timing of this. Rewind. I just don't want to slip away. Okay, so right there on away is where I kind of feel like what I want to see. Okay, so right there, I just went to liquefy again, and Krita. Oh, Krita. So frustrating. But there it is, friends. Okay, so what Krita did was it said, "Oh, you're done using the tools, so we'll just put it back to the defaults again." And so now I'm truly at a loss. Maybe there's something obvious that I'm missing here, but I'm not aware of anywhere. I mean, maybe that's it. Apply? I don't know, man. I will tell you guys, honestly, the single biggest deficiency in Krita for the last 5 years is that the transform tools don't remember their settings. And it's the biggest problem for the simple reason that if it would just remember its settings, you could automate so many things. Like, I'll give you an example. If you used a dummy layer over top of here, so you planned it out in advance and you said, well, I want him to go from here to here. I want his head to be over here. Okay. And this is good practice. It's probably something everybody should do. Okay. But, okay, so I know that I want to get from here to here. And in traditional animation parlance, if you will, you might go, well, okay, we're going to go like that. We're going to say there's going to be 2 frames that get me from here to here. Now that, of course, could be done with a standard transform. Okay, so it's not something that necessarily requires the liquefy tool. But if you plan like that, and the transform tool would remember its settings, then you could say if it only moves a little bit, then I'll just apply it 3 times, like you do with a filter. Like, I have a very gentle Gaussian blur as my default. If I need more blurring, I just go Control F, Control F, Control. I just hit it like 7 times. It's very fast, and it works. So that flexibility that we have with filters, we do not have with the transform tool. I could tell you a lot of other examples, but what I sort of figured out a long time ago was that if the transform tool would remember its settings from use to use, you would literally have no need for transform masks in most cases. There are some cases, but basically you wouldn't need it. It would be just completely unnecessary. So, having said that, okay, so I go back to liquefy, and this time it does remember the settings. So it forgot them once, and then it remembered them. So let's So what I'm going to do, and I do like this setting much better, by the way. I'm going to go ahead and say, well, if we were going to use this as a guide the way I showed, then this is what you'd do. You'd just loosen that up a bit. I'll keep this even. Okay, now that's pretty good, right? That's pretty controllable. Not too bad. And I'll emphasize that doing what I did here, having a dummy layer to guide your animation is really good practice. I mean, everybody should do it, but you know, you get to be in a hurry or whatever, and you don't. But okay, so now this little bit of distortion, you know, that distortion that we're getting, that's okay. I'm gonna say that's probably okay. Now what I want to do is go really big so that there isn't much distortion, and I can just kind of take his whole body and move it over here. So now obviously we're pretty distorted. This is where doing a standard transform might have actually been a better choice, but we're fiddling with liquify today, so that's okay. Okay. I have no idea if this is going to look all right. Let's just go ahead and see. Nope, horrible. Okay, so that's just my fault, and it's because we've got one key too many, and obviously, so this looks good and these look bad, so that's okay. We're kind of learning as we go. Honestly, that move alone looks pretty good. Let me check one thing here. Okay, yeah. So here we do need to make some. Okay, and by the way, now Krita seems to be remembering my settings, which makes me very happy. That's all I ask for. Just remember my settings. Okay, so we got that and that. And the truth is, if I want to take this even further, the smartest way to do it would be just do it to free transform. You know? Just a slight shift. Like that. Liquify is not the only tool in the toolkit, and is definitely not always the right tool for the job. Okay, so now let me check something here. I gotta tell you guys, you know what I think? That looks like a shrug. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Shift Alt and just, no pun intended, shift everything forward. Drag this one back here. Ah, that's not bad. Attitudinally, I kind of like it. Okay, so then this needs to be earlier, so I'm going to hit Shift Alt. That allows me to just ripple the whole thing, which is definitely cool. That stuff, you know, for all my complaining, I'll tell you, you didn't used to be able to do that in Krita. Okay, so now the question is, from a dialogue acting standpoint, is this stronger if in fact it either runs in reverse or he actually starts out in this pose? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab all of this stuff. I'm going to control drag it downstream, and then I'm going to hit right mouse click, mirror frames. So now the whole animation is reversed here. So now we can kind of see what it looks like in both directions. Now, this seems sappier attitudinally, whereas this seems a little more sincere. Gets the feeling I'm looking for. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to save this and quick check on the comments to see if anything's going on that I should be paying attention to. Absolutely nothing. We got 6 viewers, but nothing going on in the chatter. So cool. So now the question would be, well, what about lip sync? Well, because Krita is a frame-by-frame animation program, there is the matter of, let's use the Conan brush here. And by the way, actually, I'm going to stop everything for a half second and make a change. I'm going to isolate this layer. which I have mapped to the tilde key. All right, so I'm going to grab this brush. Okay, this is a brush I've been using for, and I actually created this brush for doing pencil tests where you can actually turn it into ink immediately by pressing harder. In practice, this really does not work very well for reasons I won't even bore you with. So I'm going to change a couple things. First of all, the darken feature, let's get rid of. Okay. And I think the size is okay. So what happens is it's kind of loose and sketchy, and then when you press harder it gets a little thinner. That's okay. I don't mind that. What I'm more concerned about is the opacity. I really want this to be, I don't know, probably something like that. Let me see. Sketch, 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 sketch. Yeah, I think that's better. I'm going to overwrite that brush preset. Nice. I've been meaning to do that for a while. So, sketch, 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 sketch. And then if you want to do ink, Dave, just do it in another layer, for crying out loud. Okay. So, that needed to happen. Back to work. Okay, so we got to do lip sync. Let's add a layer. And okay, another thing I must say I object to a little bit is I would, and I can probably set this somewhere in the preferences. In fact, if anybody knows, let me know. My question is there a setting in Krita that says, hey, by default, anytime I add a new layer, any layer by default is pinned to the timeline? Because right now, by default, they're not. And admittedly, there are situations where you don't want frames, or I should say layers, cluttering the timeline. But generally, in my experience, you want them pinned. Okay, so paint layer. First thing we're going to do is erase his mouth in general. So I'm going to grab this, go back to Conan brush, and paint this out. And then let's just make sure. Okay, so here, this needs to be a keyframe, so Control Insert. And then we get here, we'll hit Insert, erase his mouth, Insert, erase his mouth. Okay, and then all we're going to do is just merge this down. Boop, done. Okay, so now we can save our work, and all we got to do is concern ourselves with Vespar's mouth. Now, let me think about this for half a second. Since we're talking about transform masks today, why don't we do it this way? We'll skip the first frame. Why is it? Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Whatever I did wasn't quite right. Okay. That's all right. Stuff happens. So I'll just go ahead and go through. I guess I need a keyframe there. And now yeah, same thing. Okay, so yeah, I guess on the earlier frame, because it is frame by frame animation and all the pixels are baked into every single frame, I really needed to do the erase operation on every single frame. So that's all right. I'm just roughing it in, and then I'm going to go back and deal with the mistakes. All right, now I'll just go backwards. Erase that. So a little bit of a, little bit of work for sure to sort of clean that up. Oops. Get rid of the stray pixels, and we're good. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. Okay, so we'll Control E, merge that down, save our work as usual. And back to lip sync. So I'm going to hit Insert and not concern myself with his initial mouth shape. Okay, so he's going to say, I just. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to make this black. and we're going to do the traditional anime pattern. What's the traditional anime pattern? At 8 frames per second, it would be open. It would be open, almost closed. So I'm actually going to tighten this down. By the way, we will be making this layer slightly transparent so that it sits in nicely with the flesh tone. Okay, and then what we want is we want to take this one, not be in erase mode. What I'm going to do is just carefully make this bigger. Okay, so anime dialogue. The reason we're doing it this way is that this will be translated into other languages, so you need a lip sync mechanism that works in all languages, actually. Okay, that's important. All right, so what I'm going to do is grab these. So for those of you who are wondering, how do you do cloning in Krita? Here's how. You grab the frames you want to clone. You then clone the keyframes. Okay. So it's a little non-intuitive. You might think cloning is the paste operation, when in fact cloning is the cut operation. And then you just paste the keyframes. And what gets pasted is the clones. So when I'm on this frame, you see how this one turns like a little zebra stripe? Same idea here. So these are all clones. Can I do it twice? Good question. Nope. Nope. It's a one-time operation. So if you're going to be doing it a lot, you probably should set some hotkeys. Because if you want to clone this now, you can do this. You can grab the whole batch and then clone that. And it's the paste operation is when the clones get inserted. Okay? Okay. So now obviously right here, from here, we have a problem. Now, and it's a big problem. What's the problem? Well, this is the danger that you will encounter when you start using clones. If I transform this, every one of these is going to get transformed. So we can't do that. So we really need to get those keyframes out of there and see if that destroyed anything. Okay, it didn't. Okay, that's cool. So here what we need to do is just insert a new keyframe. We know that the shape we needed was, oh, come on there, Dave. Hit the wrong key. Was this one. Okay, now this we can transform. Better zoom way the heck in so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to actually punch this down. Okay, and now would probably be a good, actually, strike that. I'm going to take this, control, I'm going to drag this back here, and then transform this as well, just because it's sort of convenient to do so. Okay, so now I want to look at his dialogue, make sure I'm matching. I just don't want her slipping away again. Okay. I just don't want her slipping away again. Okay, it's okay. There's probably a couple lines too many here. Just don't want. And they do seem, it does seem a little fast-paced. It's okay. It's okay. We're in the zone. I'm gonna switch that to 50%. Just want to slip away again. Okay, yeah. The only thing I'm having a complaint here about would be that I'm not sure that the body move really helped. I mean, I actually wonder if leaving him. Yep, it didn't help. So what I'm going to do is, there's kind of the end of that bit. So I'm going to grab this whole bit here and drag it downstream. Just don't want to slipping away again. Okay, and by the way, it's worth noting that once he settles here, all of these frames are redundant, because if you're familiar with, what is it called in Tahoma? Implicit hold. Implicit hold is by default the way most animation programs work, actually. So once he settles on this frame is going to stay on the screen until I insert a new animation keyframe, which of course in this case is empty. Okay, quick check on the chit chat. Looks like nothing's going on, so we're good. Okay, so let's keep rocking. And to tell you the truth, this is actually completely adequate as is, because while he's saying his line of dialogue, it's probably going to cut back to Tobias anyway. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to leave these I'm going to leave that motion on the timeline, but I'm going to set this to just 24 and render this. So let's just render this guy out and get it into the timeline. And I'm basically saving this bit here for the next shot of Vespar. Okay, so now we need to do a switcheroo. Boop, back to here. And you guys will have to remind me to not forget to switch screens again. Okay, so this is going to be 3-10E. Boom. There should be 24 frames. And indeed there are. Those frames need to be at 8 frames per second. I'm looking for 3-10E here. Popping it in here. We don't want any interpolation. One big reason why is that I said the lip sync was a little fast. I could actually time stretch this a little bit, and so it plays back more slowly, and it'll probably look fine. So I'm going to go ahead and switch screens now so I don't forget. And let me put in this line of dialogue real quick. I just don't want us slipping away again. I don't know if that worked. I just don't want us slipping away again. Okay. And as I mentioned yesterday, all the dialogues are going to be re-recorded later in the studio. I just don't want us slipping away again. Yeah. I just don't want to slip. I want that to be just a bit earlier, I think. I just don't want to. That's too early. Pretty obviously. I just don't want us slipping away again. Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm actually going to slow that down even a little bit more, and let's see where it starts. I just don't. Okay, so let's put that there. I just don't want us slipping away again. Yeah, in my opinion, slowing this down, I slowed this down to 0.687, which means this is actually playing back at about 5 frames a second. I just don't want us slipping away again. But it looks good, so fine. Let's keep it.
Flank Newsy's borders in case she backpedals. We'll find her. I just don't want.
Okay, and the one thing I would change is probably start it a bit later, so we're not.
We'll find her.
Time looking at.
I just don't want.
Nope, I actually think it should be even tighter. I'm gonna make it super tight and see how that feels.
We'll find her. I just don't want us slipping away again.
Okay, so now the question becomes, from the standpoint of like the rule of thirds or whatever, should this whole shooting match be transformed? And I'm going to say absolutely. So I'm going to put these guys in a group, and then I'm going to add a transform mask. So I'm not going to animate the transform mask. I'm just using the transform mask to apply a transformation to a large group of layers all together. And that feels a little bit crowding in the screen. Oops, this should be shifted. Okay, so let's just see what the difference is here. Okay, that was not supposed to happen. I want to make that just a little bigger, and I feel like okay, I'm sorry. I hit the right arrow thinking it was going to move the transform tool incrementally, and it turns out no. So what you want to do is you want to hit shift and then drag. So per the rule of thirds, that is a slight improvement. Right? Save your work. Anytime you're using transform masks, save early and save often, or you will be crying like a baby when all your work is lost. Cool beans. All right, back here.
Find her. I just don't want her slipping away again.
Okay, and by the way, once he finishes that line, yeah, it needs to cut off and back to Tobias. Like
We'll find her. I just...
Okay, so I'm kind of fiddling with some editing stuff here, but honestly, this is a little...
We'll find her.
This might be a better choice. Take this, give him a little more of a lead in, but use it to cut off Tobias.
Petals. We'll find her. I just don't want her slipping away again.
And I definitely don't like the way I did that line
Find
of
her.
dialogue, but it's
I
certain.
just don't want her slipping away again.
Okay, that's fine for now. Not meaning that we want to be schlocky about it, but meaning that the way the next shot of Tobias feels in the signal flow may cause me to change these yet again. But right now, I kind of want to get the signal flow, see how it all flows
Wait.
together first.
You do? I've already sent a detachment toward Gripson and another back to flank Newsy's borders in case she backpedals. We'll find her. I just don't want her slipping away again.
I'm going to redo that line right now. Actually, it's sufficiently egregious.
I just don't want her slipping away again. I just don't want her slipping away again.
I like that better. That's really more the type of
Backpedals.
thing I was looking
We'll
for.
find her. I just don't want her slipping away again.
Okay, cool. And it's basically a matter of animation economy for me that says, we want to use the Robert Rodriguez approach to editing, which means lots of cuts, keep things moving in the edit stage with lots of cuts, because that's what really allows us to be jumping from the same shots back and forth and just using them to get the dialogue in, You would think this is the shot we just looked at, but it's not. It's actually this one. So, but the thing is, it flows. It really does kind of flow.
Let's have a peek at the whole shot.
Not a sign of Her Highness. I suppose we'll resume the search in
See
the
how
morning.
the voices overlap the visuals?
Morning?
Keep
Are you
things moving.
trying to help her escape?
She's here somewhere.
Cut,
I
cut,
found
cut,
this
cut,
near
cut.
her campsite.
Highness, where? What campsite?
There was a smoldering fire. You couldn't miss it.
And that blasted kid.
So this is
I
what,
mean, it's possible she
when-
came
when you
upon the
have the
campsite
edit
after Luka left.
chomping
Luka?
along this quickly.
Who's Luka?
It's
The
really
orphan,
cool
Highness.
because a very
Not a sign of Her Highness.
a fairly modest bit of underscore pretty much finishes it up, puts a button on it so it all flows quite nicely. So anyway, there we have what we have. Now I'm going to look over here. Why would this... Okay, that's kind of interesting. Why would these... Yeah, I'm really curious. How does Krita decide? Like, if you look at these little gray bars here, it's not as if there's any indication that frames that are not included in the length of the timeline get cached at all. But yet, when I was scrubbing it, at first nothing happened, and then they showed up. So there is no visual cue to say that, yeah, you should expect that to kind of sort of work. Now, one thing, we do have a performance penalty we are experiencing right now, which would be solved by merging this group. I don't think I want to merge the group. I want to apply the transform mask. I guess we did, yeah, I mean, we are applying it to the whole group, so the only disadvantage to baking this down, as it were, would be that we are committing to all of the lip sync. I'm not sure I want to do that. Okay, guys, so this is actually kind of important. So I'm going to show you something here. This is his mouth. This is Vespar. So the transform mask is on the group in order to be applied to both of these guys. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this transform mask and apply it just to Vespar. Then I'm going to duplicate this transform mask and apply it just, I'm sorry, I meant apply it to the mouth. Okay? Now this layer can be flattened, assuming everything works as advertised. This layer can be flattened. Okay, so by duplicating the transform mask, what I did was I applied it separately to his body and his face. So now we have the transform baked into the shot. We have better performance because we're not having to calculate the transform mask constantly every single frame, but yet we've still got the mouth and the body separate from each other. That means that I can mix and match and rearrange the mouth shapes or do whatever the heck I want later on. Okay? Interesting. Okay, so I think that's it for now. Yeah, it's getting to be close to lunchtime. So, let me look at the chat. I assume there's probably nothing really going on, but, and by the way, just so you guys know, it will look like the old live streams got deleted off my channel, and that is not the case. What's happening is, you wind up with 2 hours of live stream that the fact of the matter is, other than the initial live stream itself, hey Tom, other than the initial live stream, like basically nobody watches these. Okay, you get a few, but so I only keep them around for posterity. Therefore, what I do is, after I do a live stream, I may not do it immediately. I may wait a week and do it to 5 at a time or something. But basically what I do is I mark them all as unlisted videos. But on my channel, they're all automatically included in the Animation Truman Show playlist. So in the very unusual and strange circumstance where someone would actually want to go back and watch one of these live streams, that's how you find it. You would go to my channel, go to the playlists, go to the Animation Truman Show playlist, and you'll find that these live streams are like automatically tacked. I believe it's in chronological order. Let me look at that. Actually, I'm kind of curious now. So I'm going to my own YouTube channel. Let's just have a look and find out what the hell is going on here. So if you go to live, most of these, frankly, should probably be cataloged in the same way that I just mentioned. But basically, this is the live stream that's going on right now. But the ones for the last 4 or 5 days are gone. Well, that's because in my playlists, you've got the Animation Truman Show. So let's view the full playlist. And some of these playlists are like ancient. I need to like cull my channel. 1 day ago. So yeah, they're in reverse chronological order. So that's probably good. So the most recent ones are first in the list, for what that's worth. So anyway, that's what happened to, yesterday's and previous days live streams. So hey Tom, you showed up just in time for the party to end, unfortunately. How long have I been streaming? I've been streaming almost an hour and a half. And pretty good progress today. I mean, I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about the transform masks and their sort of pros and cons. And if there are no other questions from the peanut gallery, then I am going to end the stream in 10 seconds. Alright, I am getting ready to kill it, and I was trying to put a comment to Tom, and I will see you guys on the flip side. Maybe tomorrow. Probably tomorrow.